Good evening. Tonight, a special edition of Lehrer.tv. Recently, I was privileged to interview Tavis Smiley, the public radio and TV host, entrepreneur, and philanthropist who is celebrating his 20th year in broadcasting. It took place at Cooper Union, sponsored by WNYC Radio. Tavis, who just published a book called Fail Up, 20 Lessons of Building Success from Failure, is an inspiration. In the conversation you were about to see, he was frank about his tough childhood, a near-fatal beating by his dad, and his rocky relationship with Barack Obama. And did you know that a few years ago, Time magazine named Tavis one of the 100 most influential people, not in the country, but in the world? To begin the conversation, I asked just how did he get that name, Smiley?
When I was a kid, I hated my name. I hated the name Tavis Smiley. Tavis because more often than not, which is sometimes still the case, I get called Travis. So folk couldn't get it right, number one. And number two, I hated Smiley because of all the jokes that I heard as a kid with a last name like Smiley. Over the years, I've come to appreciate the name because in the business that we are in, you want a name that stands out. And I've been very fortunate that over the years, all kinds of authors and writers have had a field day with headlines with my name in it, that last name. So I've come to appreciate the name because it stands out, and that's a good thing. But that said, it is a name that I wasn't born with. My name changed 3 times before I became Smiley. Long story short, my mother had me out of wedlock in Mississippi when she was just 16 years of age. Was so ashamed back in the 60s when being pregnant out of wedlock wasn't in vogue or cool, particularly in the South in a black family, that she ran away from Mississippi to a place called New York City. Went as far away as she could from Mississippi to avoid the shame and the condemnation. She thought nobody knew. As it turns out later, everybody knew before she left that she was already pregnant. But she came here and got a job working as a domestic in this city, trying to run away from that shame. So all of my life, I've wanted to redeem the shame that my mother felt for getting pregnant with this embryo named Tavis eventually. And my whole life, I do everything to make my mama proud, to make her happy because of what she had to endure. But she went on. She comes to New York, tries to run away, eventually makes it back to Mississippi with this baby named Tavis. And when I'm born, because she didn't marry my biological father, I start out with my mother's maiden name, which is Roberts. Along the way, because she didn't want me to be born as a bastard child, she married a man that she met on the subway here in New York City. I know that's a scary thought in New York. Just to meet some Negro on the subway and marry him. But she didn't want me to be born as a bastard child with shame. So she met this guy on the subway, went out on a few dates with him and married him. So I was born with that name, his last name. And then when she met the man who raised me at the age of 2, when she married this guy named Emory Smiley, my father was such an upstanding guy that he said, "This is my son. I am going to raise him. I am going to take care of him. I'm going to be his father, and we are going to call him Tavis Smiley." So the third try, we got to Smiley.
In other words, if Donald Trump ever asked for your birth certificate, he's going to get an earful.
Let me tell you a quick 30-second story about that, because there's something behind that. My mother, there are 3 stories in this book that I was so ashamed, 3 mistakes, 3 failures that I committed in my life or endured, that I was so ashamed, Brian, that I didn't even tell my mother or father about. 3 stories that they didn't even know about. So when I sent them the manuscript a few weeks ago, I had to call them ahead of time so they wouldn't go into full cardiac arrest when they read the book of these things. But what's funny about this is that when I decided many years ago to travel out of the country for the very first time, I was honored on my very first international trip that Dr. Maya Angelou took me to Africa with her for 10 days. My very first trip out of the country, Maya Angelou is taking me to Africa. I had to go get a passport. My mother, because she was ashamed of all the drama of how we got to Smiley, had never told me all this backstory, that my name had changed 3 times, and this Smiley was not on my birth certificate. You can't imagine the hell that I went through trying to get my passport because none of my documents matched up. True story. I go to the payphone at the at the office, at the immigration office, wherever I am in LA, at the federal building, I go to the payphone to call my mother. This is back in the day of payphones. That's how long ago it was. I go to the payphone to call my mom, and I said, Mom, I'm trying to get a passport, and something is wrong here. These documents aren't matching up. And on the phone, she broke down crying. And when a black man, any man who cares about his mama hears his mama crying, it just moved me. But anyway, the point is that I had to leave the payphone, go home to my house, call my mother back once she consoled herself, and I finally got the whole backstory that I just shared with you, but I learned that in the passport office. Go figure.
And Papa Smiley was an Air Force officer, correct? But the family lived mostly in a trailer park in Indiana that was almost all white. He didn't make enough money for better than that as an Air Force officer?
He was a non-commissioned officer. He went in right out of high school. My mother and father are the guardians, the parents of 10 children. So my mother has me out of wedlock. I'm the firstborn child. She and my father, Mr. Smiley, go on to have 5 other boys. So I'm the eldest of 6 boys. And then when my mother's sister was brutally murdered in Mississippi, my mother and father took in her 4 kids, Pam, Phyllis, Paul, and Patrick. So it's a strange twist on the Brady Bunch story. But we end up being a family of 10 kids. So there are 10 kids, my mother, my father, and my maternal grandmother we call Big Mama, 13 people living in a 3-bedroom trailer in a trailer park. That's how I grew up.
That's not 8 is enough. That's cheaper by the dozen.
Yeah.
And your mama was is an evangelical preacher, correct?
She is indeed. My father is the hardest working person I've ever known. He had a full-time job in the Air Force and worked 3 part-time jobs on top of that to take care of this family. And never one day did he ever complain and say, Tavis ain't my son. Why am I doing this? These other 4 kids are your nieces and nephews. Why am I doing this? This is your mother, not my mother, living with us. My father never complained one day. He's a great man, and so I get my discipline from my father, and my spirituality, my abiding faith comes from my mother.
I read that the first time you were in the media was when you were in 7th grade, and you and your sister got whipped by your Sunday school teacher. Is that correct?
Yeah. We got partly correct. We were in church, and this person in charge of this Sunday school session accused my sister. I talk about this in the What I Know For Sure book. My memoir came out a few years ago. The defining moment of my life. Long story very short, we were accused of doing something in our church that we did not do. The minister stands up in front of a congregation even larger than this and reads my sister and me the riot act. We're 11 and 12 years of age, and in front of the entire congregation, he accused us, he demonized us, he embarrassed us, he humiliated us. My mother and father, my father specifically, was so outraged by the embarrassment, certainly in African-American families, in poor African-American families, as has been the case historically, the only statue you have is in the church. My father had no stature in the community as a poor black man. He was a deacon in the church, a trustee in the church, regarded in the church. He was embarrassed by this. We got home that night without asking any questions, the greatest mistake of his life, he has said many times. My father pulled out an extension cord and beat my sister and I so mercilessly that we were in the hospital for 10 days in traction, not knowing whether we were going to live. We both thankfully survived that incident. My father went to jail. I'm in a small town in Indiana. It becomes a very public story, but it was a defining moment in my life. It took a long time for my father, Mr. Smiley, and I to get through this. I mean, things are cool now. We finally got through it, but it was, without question, as I said, the defining moment of my life.
And yet, despite that coming in a way in the name of religion, you did not get alienated. You've come out a quite religious person, haven't you?
Spiritual person. I make a distinction between religious and spiritual. I'm a very spiritual person. I absolutely have an abiding faith. The last chapter, as you know, in this book is called Father Knows Best. And I mean the Father, God the Father knows best. So I have an abiding faith. I have nothing against people who are atheists or agnostic. God bless you. But I just happen to be a person of faith. But that comes from being in church literally 7 days a week. I remember it like it was yesterday. This is how I grew up from the time I was, out of the womb for the first 18 years of my life. This is what I did every day. After school, of course. Monday night at 7 o'clock, we had prayer meeting at church. Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, adult require rehearsal. Wednesday night, 7 o'clock, Bible study. Thursday night, 7 o'clock, missionary meeting. Friday night, 7 o'clock, young people's meeting. Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, prayer. 10:30 a.m. junior choir rehearsal. 11 o'clock at noon, my family would clean the church. Sunday morning, 9:45 a.m. Sunday school. 11:30 a.m. Sunday morning worship. 5:30 p.m. children's church. 7 o'clock Sunday night evening service. Back Monday night for 18 years of my life. If I don't get to heaven, none of y'all has a shot at all.
Man. If I had to go through that, it would have made me an atheist so quickly. Mom, I don't believe. I got soccer practice and I got to go.
Yeah.
But evangelical Christianity these days is associated with the most reactionary kind of politics in America. So if Christianity can hold that and people, hold on to it and proclaim their reactionary politics and views in the name of that, and you, knowing all that you are and you stand for, claim it as well, then what does the religion mean if it can be anything to anybody?
It's all the more reason why those of us who are of conscience, those who really do know what it means to be a person of faith, for those who happen to be Christians, those who really believe in what Christianity is all about, have to bear witness. We have to stay committed unto death to trying to bring out the best in what this faith tradition is all about. As we all know, you certainly know in this city, every faith tradition has in it some rogues. Dr. King put it this way: there's some evil in the best of us and some good in the worst of us. So none of us is perfect, no faith is perfect, and I just believe that while I take great exception to those who practice my faith or claim to practice it and don't do it in a righteous way, it just means that people like me have to keep reminding them, holding them accountable to the best of what the faith tradition is.
You write in Fail Up that as a kid, you wanted to grow up to become Indiana's first black U.S. Senator. Mm-hmm. Did you want that because you wanted to be something or because you wanted to do something?
Both at the time, to be honest. Great. I love Brian Lehrer's questions. Makes you dig deep. Both at the time. When you grow up in a family where you feel like you are an outsider, when you feel like you have nothing, when you feel like you have to prove yourself, there's no doubt about the fact that you sometimes want to attain stuff for the sake of being something. I learned over the years that you can't be something if you don't want to do something, so these things are obviously inextricably linked. But I also wanted to do something because at 13, I started working a little part-time job after school. I started working for a local city councilman in my hometown of Kokomo, Indiana. And I got to see firsthand what a true public servant does. I believe that right next to teaching, there is no calling, no vocation more noble than public service when done the right way. I don't mean garden variety politicians. I don't mean triangulation. I mean real public servants. There's nothing more noble. And I got a chance to work for a guy who was the real deal in my hometown of Kokomo, Indiana. He was beloved. And I came to really believe and to accept and to take from him this working operational definition of leadership for me. And it goes simply like this: you can't lead people unless you love people, and you can't save people unless you serve people. You can't lead if you don't love, you can't save if you don't serve. So the leadership then is really about two simple things. What is the depth of your love for the people, and what is the quality of your service to them? But I saw in him, as a leader, love and service enacted every day, and that's why I wanted to go into public service.
So after college, you went to work for LA Mayor Tom Bradley, then you ran for city council in LA and lost, and you wrote in Fail Up, "I took the loss very personally. Not only was my political fire doused, the path I had passionately trod since boyhood had suddenly vanished." You used the word vanished. Why did you fail down so hard at that moment? You were young. Lots of people run for office numerous times before they win.
Because I really thought that my calling and my vocation and my purpose in life was to be a public servant. I thought that was my ministry, if I can put it that way. And when I lost, my world came crashing down, because that's all that I'd ever wanted to do. I write in the book, as you know, in that last chapter, Father Knows Best, that sometimes a dead end is really a finish line. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Put another way, sometimes in life we plan and God laughs. I tell the story that Barack Obama is only president today. He ought to be the poster child for failing up, because I say that respectfully and lovingly, but when he ran for Congress the first time against Bobby Rush on the south side of Chicago. He got the brakes beat off of him 3-1 by Bobby Rush. A few years later, he runs for the U.S. Senate. His opponents start falling off like flies. As we know, he waltzes into the U.S. Senate. In 2000, in my hometown of L.A. now, he couldn't get in the building at the Democratic convention. He didn't have credentials to get in. He was hustling, trying to get in the building at the Democratic convention in 2000. 2008, this cat's in the Oval Office. If that ain't failing up, I don't know what is. It suggests to me that sometimes we have plans for our own life and God has something bigger for us. So in retrospect, I'm glad I lost that council race.
You know, I told on the radio show this morning, I had former Indiana Senator Evan Bayh as a guest. And I told him that we were doing this gig tonight and that you as a boy wanted to become the first black senator from Indiana. And he said, you know, Tavis is still young enough, he might still be able to do it.
I was inspired into public
service. You gotta
service.
let me ask my question.
Yeah.
Are you done with politics for sure forever?
I never say for sure forever because I don't know what the future holds, but I have absolutely no interest in it right now. I'm concerned about the devolution of our culture, the decay of our civilization, and I don't know that for me right now, the best way to address that is inside the body politic. I think it's where I am right now, trying to use these platforms that I have to get people to re-examine the assumptions they hold, to expand their inventory of ideas, to look at the world through a different prism. So no, I'm not interested right now, but his father, Birch Bayh, was one of my childhood heroes.
So before we go to Movement 2, Tavis and Barack, you've been on this tour having different talk show hosts interview you, Phil Donahue, elsewhere in New York last night. I know Larry King did it on your own show for 2 nights, but this was not your original career goal. So did you have talk show host role models growing up?
Last night when I sat in this same position with Phil Donahue, I was on cloud 9 last night. Donahue has had so much courage, so much conviction, so much commitment over the years to speak truth to power. I've said many times that I believe it is the telling of truth that allows suffering to speak. And Donahue has been such a truth teller over the years that sitting across from him last night, he was the first, of course, but the first one that I just fell in love with every day after school. I couldn't wait to get home to watch Donahue. So being across from him last night was the highlight of this journey for me.
Did you ever watch William F. Buckley?
I did.
On Firing Line on PBS.
Couldn't understand him, but I watched it.
It was kind of academic, right? But in a way, he's a little bit like you because he had his politics, which were out there, didn't play neutral moderator, but he would have guests from all points on the political spectrum. And so it was a different kind of model, you know, than Larry King, say, who doesn't show his hand.
That's right. And I'm okay with that. I don't think that I don't think you have to insult the intellect of the American people. Certainly not the public radio audience or the public TV audience. You know this better than I do. The public radio audience is the smartest audience in the country. The public TV audience is the. We appreciate your modesty. We appreciate your modesty.
I was going to say, or maybe just the most self-congratulatory.
But they're the smartest audience in the country. And I think that the audience can decipher when I am expressing my point of view in another platform. I don't use PBS or NPR or PRI to push an agenda. I don't use it to put my own viewpoint out there. I do that in all the other places that I appear, Meet the Press, et cetera, et cetera. But when I'm sitting in the same chair that you sit in every day, interviewing people, I'm as curious as the audience is, and I think the audience knows the difference.
Well, when you were on BET, and I don't know what the right terminology here is exactly, but people may have said that that was like a black show. And
it was.
I guess that's the right terminology. Yeah. And on PBS, it's a general show. So, I mean, I hate these terms, really. But is it a different job that you do differently?
BET was a different mandate at the time. When you're on a black entertainment television network and you're talking to an overwhelmingly African American audience and they want to hear about African American issues, I was very clear of what that lane was all about. I mean, I'm not naive. The only person in the country that had as many interviews with Bill Clinton while in the White House as I did was Jim Lehrer. Jim Lehrer and I tied for the most one-on-ones with Bill Clinton while he was in the White House. Now, I understand full well why he's talking to Jim Lehrer, but I also understand why he was talking to me. And it's not because I was the best talk show host. I was talking to the black folk. And Bill Clinton wanted and needed that black support, and he appreciated that African American support. And so I'm the one that got to talk to him as much as anybody else, only because I was at BET. So I understood what it was.
Movement 2, Tavis and Barack. When did you first meet Barack Obama?
Maybe 15, 16 years ago, in Chicago. And I don't even remember this story, and I didn't think it was true until my staff went back and pulled all the documents to prove this to me. But 15, 16 years ago, he was already charting his way forward. And ironically, nobody in America knew Barack Obama, and I was already out there on national TV and radio every day. And he really wanted to meet me. He wanted to sit and pick my brain and share ideas and thoughts. And apparently I'd blown him off a number of times when he called to meet. I didn't know who the guy was, but at some point I agreed to meet with him, and my staff later informed me that we were supposed to meet for 20 minutes one day, and I sat and talked to him for 3 hours at the Four Seasons in Chicago. That was the first time we actually met.
And did you think right away, this is the dude who would become the first black president?
Absolutely not. I thought the exact opposite, because I invited him to come spend some time with the kids in my foundation. I have a foundation, as you know, that works for years now with kids on leadership development. So I invited then State Senator Barack Obama to come spend some time with my kids at our leadership retreat. He bored these kids out of their mind. He put me to sleep. And I was so afraid that the kids were just gonna, and part of it is, at the time he was a state senator, but he was a constitutional law professor. He just didn't connect with these kids. He didn't relate to them. I sometimes laugh about that, thinking how well he connected with the youth vote when he ran for president. But at that time, he had no connection at all with these kids. I'm like, this guy ain't got a shot. So I didn't think it would ever happen, and obviously I was wrong about that, but I didn't think it when I met him, no.
How many times did he come on your show as either state senator from Illinois or U.S. senator from Illinois?
I only know this because my staff told me this as well. 8 times.
8 times. And then during the primaries in February 2008, you invited him to the State of Black America Forum in Orleans.
Right.
He declined and offered to send Michelle, and you rejected the offer and had a public dust-up. What happened there? What
happened was that the story has been circulating for a few years now that he declined and offered Michelle. He did not. I've said so publicly on radio, on television. The campaign never offered Michelle Obama, number one, to come to my forum. Number two,
you know that version of it is out there on a million websites.
Trust me. There's a whole chapter in this book about what I learned about the internet and the failure that we all are going to face in the future if we don't get a handle on how out of control this internet is with rumors and lies and innuendo. We got a real problem here. But they never offered Michelle Obama to come, number one. Number two, if they had, I would have rejected it. Not because I do not like or love or respect Michelle Obama, but because when I invited Hillary Clinton, their first response was, can we send Bill? Now, Bill Clinton is my friend. He's my friend. But I told them no. This is for candidates. It's not for candidate wives. And with all due respect, our husbands, I
was wondering what you were saying there.
So the point was that it was about the candidates. So it wasn't about anything personal. So the story is that because they offered me Michelle, which they did not, and I turned her down, and he turned me down, that somehow I had some personal animus, some personal axe to grind with Barack Obama. My issue with Senator Obama and President Obama has always been principled, and it is about holding him accountable to the best interest of the American people, including African Americans. I don't believe that great presidents are born, great presidents are made. They have to be pushed into their greatness quickly. There is no Abraham Lincoln if there is no Frederick Douglass pushing him. There is no FDR if there is no A. Philip Randolph pushing him. There is no LBJ if there is no MLK pushing him. Left to his own devices, he will be just another garden variety politician. Left to his own devices, especially now with the divided Congress, he'll start triangulating like Bill Clinton, and he won't step into the stature that I want for him to be not just a good president, but a great president, pushing an agenda that is more progressive for all of Americans. It's a principled position. It's not personal.
But staying on that incident for just a minute, as a candidate for President of the United States, he gets 1 million invitations to appear 1 million places.
That's right.
was there anything so special about Tavis Smiley's State of Black America Forum that it actually said something about the morality or the passion or the dedication of this president?
No. It didn't. I am not arrogant enough, hubristic enough to think that just because you don't come to my event, I mean, I'm a talk show host, like you every day. I mean, I know nobody ever says no to you.
Never. And by the way, from that video, can I have your Rolodex?
But do you know how many times a week we get told no? I mean, I get told no to my staff. We get told no all the time when it comes to booking our TV show and booking our radio show. And when I do events, I mean, where people get off thinking that just because you tell me no, I got personal animus. It doesn't work that way in our business.
Right. And people need to know that for you and me and everybody else in the business, the reason any politician comes on our show is, and I don't think this is too cynical, I think this is just the truth, not because they feel a responsibility to be accountable to their public. They have a million ways that they can do that when they choose and how they choose. They do it if they think that it's going to be good for them.
Absolutely.
And so that's a dance that you and I always have to dance with these politicians, is they come on because they think it's going to be good for them. Some people only choose to go on with people who they consider friendly. Some people choose to go on with people who they think are friendly or not, but because they think it builds them up with different audiences. And so that's the starting point.
I agree. And the only thing I would add to that is, you know, and I don't mean to demonize or cast a blanket aspersion on politicians, but after 20 years, I'm getting sick and tired of talking to politicians, and I'll tell you why. Because when they come in, one, what you said is correct, but two, when they get there, as you know, it's all about staying on message. You don't get any authentic answers out of them. They're not going to budge off their same statements they give, 18 times a day. So that oftentimes you don't even get to the heart of the matter when you talk to these elected officials, because they want to stay on message, whatever that means for them.
So has the election and the presidency so far of Barack Obama, in your opinion, been good, bad, or a non-event for Black America?
I thought that Barack Obama was the best choice a couple of years ago, in 2008, a few years ago, for one simple reason. I pushed him really hard in that campaign. And I know what it means, what it feels like to be beloved in your community one day and be persona non grata the next. I mean, the record books will show this. Remnick writes about it in his book. Jonathan Alter writes about it in his book. There are chapters, pages dedicated to the Obama-Tavis phenomenon or the drama. So it's already down in history and will be discussed, I suspect, years into the future. But I know what it's like to try to hold somebody accountable and you have your own community turn on you just for doing what you've always done. And yet, I wouldn't change anything about what I did in terms of raising these issues of accountability, because I want the best for Black America. And I think that the president has not focused in the way that he should on what ails the African American community. Not to the detriment or the ignoring of any other community, but let's be frank about this. Black unemployment is double the national average. In some places, depending on the demo, triple and quadruple the national average. When asked about Black unemployment, this president gave the same answer that Ronald Reagan gave during that recession, which was that a rising tide will lift all boats. Well, not necessarily. All the boats didn't go down at the same time, and they ain't gonna come up at the same time. We're sitting on the island of Manhattan right now. On this island, there's a place called Harlem and a place called Wall Street. Harlem is still down, and Wall Street has been, as we say down south, has been done come up. When the tide does come up, if you're in a yacht and I'm in a dinghy, we still got a problem. So this notion that a rising tide in and of itself lifts all boats, I don't buy. And this president respectfully is so afraid of being accused of being tribal that Black folk who have supported him and been the most loyal are the ones who are catching the most hell, and I hate to see that suffering rendered invisible.
Okay, now I'm going to channel Jay Carney, the White House press secretary. And he would say the political reality is that Barack Obama came in during this epical financial crisis, passed this huge stimulus to keep unemployment from getting even worse in public sector, among other places, passed the epical health reform law, as progressive a one as he could get through Congress, which was still seen so far left that it spawned the Tea Party movement, which thinks he's a communist. And that Tea Party movement has become the political force in politics for the last 2 years as a backlash to how progressive Barack Obama is. So how much more could he have accomplished by speaking more like Tavis Smiley is speaking tonight?
So you want a Golden Globe or an Academy Award. That was a really good Jay Carney moment. Here's how I see this. The president's had a lot on his plate, and I'm very empathetic toward that, number one. Number two, things got a lot worse when he took over. And presidencies are really made, as I see it, not by what you say during the campaign, but how you handle the crises that come at you once you're in the Oval Office. I understand all of that. Having said that, no one put a gun to Barack Obama's head and made him run for president. He wanted this job, he asked for it, he ran for it, and he got it, and now he is our leader. Fundamentally, it comes down to a simple question for me. Are you going to side with the weak, or are you going to side with the strong? And too often in the first 2.5 years of this presidency, we have seen him side and choose the strong over the weak. When Wall Street came a-calling, he responded. When the auto industry came calling, he responded. On the Israel-Palestinian question, he has been exactly where the Jewish community respectfully wants him to be. On the issue of don't ask, don't tell, he took a little while getting to it. He should have done it sooner, but he finally got around responding to the pressure from the gay and lesbian community to deal with that particular issue. I could do this all night. The point is that there are other constituencies who want to hold the president accountable to the best of their agendas as well. And ultimately, again, it comes back to whose side are you on? In this budget debate, I said on Meet the Press a few weeks ago, I believe that budgets are moral documents. Budgets are moral documents. If I can quote that great philosopher who hails out of New York, Jay-Z, you can say what you say, but you are what you are. And when you put your budget on the table, we know who you really are and what your priorities are. For all that Jay Carney or anybody else could say about what they have done, and they've done much, don't get me wrong, this budget lets us know what his priorities are, and that's a problem for people catching hell every day.
All right, we are running. We're running long. I want to get to the audience for as long as we possibly can, but I want to do a little bit of movement 3,
Okay.
Fail Up. Not many people are both political commentators and motivational speakers and authors. But Fail Up is really, it's your story, but it's also a motivational book. Do you see yourself as both of those things, political commentator and motivational speaker and author?
I think each of us is a motivator. Each of us has a story. Each of us, our lives is a story. And anything that resides, any part of your narrative that can be used to uplift, to enlighten, to encourage, and to empower others, I hope that at some point in your life you find the courage, the conviction, and the commitment to share that part of your story to help other people. This is the 15th book, no doubt about the fact. It's the most transparent, the most difficult, the most embarrassing book I've ever written, because these 20 stories represent the worst mistakes, the biggest failures I've ever had in my life. Ultimately, it's about, I think, what Samuel Beckett once said, and it's at the start of this book, the very first page, you find these words from Samuel Beckett, the great Nobel laureate and poet. Beckett put it this way: ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. I love that. Try again, fail better. And for me, I hope these stories about the things that I've had to endure and the lessons I've learned inspire other people to realize that failure is not final, failure is not fatal, failing does not make you a failure. You're not going to have success anyway unless you endure some failures along the way, but that ultimately every single one of us, to the extent that we are successful, will fail our way up. I don't know anybody, if they're being honest, in any field of human endeavor, who won't admit to you that they've learned more from their failures than they've learned from their successes.
There are different self-help traditions, from Zen yoga, Ram Dass, Be Here Now, to Creflo Dollar, to Rick Warren, to Malcolm X, to Susie Orman. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Somewhere between Susie and Malcolm. No, I'd like to think that I'm uniquely different. as each of us is uniquely different. I didn't write this book necessarily it's in the self-help category, I guess, if you go to the bookstore. I didn't write it to be a self-help guru. That's not what I think I am. I'm not trying to change a career and start selling you product late night on television. That's not what I'm doing here. What I'm trying to do is to bear witness, to lay bare the parts of my soul that I think will help other people, which is consistent with what I've always done.
In your book, and after this we'll start taking questions from the audience, so raise your hand if you have a question, and we have producers who are going to come and call on you. In your book, you cite Martin Luther King and his concept of being a drum major for justice. Mm-hmm. But you cite it in a different way than I've ever seen before, because unlike most references to that idea, you quote him on both the upside and the downside of being a drum major for justice. How so?
Yeah. It cuts both ways. You have to be true to your calling and true to your vocation, but you also have to make sure that you balance that with not getting arrogant, not getting hubristic, and thinking that your way is the right way, or that it's your way or the highway. So it's always about connecting. It's always about checking in, always about making sure that you are staying on message, as it were, with regard to the needs of everyday people. I regard Dr. King, as I said before, as the greatest American we've ever produced. I could argue you on Abraham Lincoln, I could argue you on FDR, but to my mind, Dr. King is the greatest American we've ever produced. And I think that our democracy, I mean this sincerely, this is not hyperbole. I believe, Brian, that our democracy, the future of our democracy, is inextricably linked to how seriously we are going to connect ourselves to the legacy of Martin King. And I believe that legacy, in short, is simply this: justice for all, service to others, and a love that liberates people. When I say love, all I mean to suggest is that everybody is worthy just because. That all life doesn't just have value, but all life has equal value. And if we don't find a way to focus like a laser on the least among us, at some point this country is going to implode under the weight of its own poverty. My read of history says to me that there is no empire, arrogant though we may be, patriotic though we may be, nationalistic though we may be, there's no empire in the history of the world that has not at some point fallen, that has not at some point failed, and we would do well in America to keep that in mind.
Ma'am, hello.
Good evening. My name is Cheryl. My question to you is, I know it's different for everyone, but how do you discern between your gut instincts and the leading of the Holy Spirit?
Wow. I hope they're in sync. Number one, and they aren't always in sync. Again, I don't mean to proselytize about this, but I want to answer your question as you've asked it. Every day, I pray for humility. I pray for guidance. I pray to stand in my truth, to have that truth revealed to me. And at the end of the day, if I make a mistake, I borrow a phrase, I hope that it'll be charged to my head and not to my heart. Somebody asked me yesterday on a nationally syndicated black radio program what I wanted to say to those persons who were still mad at me 3 years later because they thought I was hating on Obama. What do you want to say to them now? I said very simply, if you understand what my modus operandi is, what motivates me, what my process is, whether you like me or loathe me or agree or disagree with me, I love black folk and there ain't nothing they can do about it. And understand that everything I do is because I love my people. I love all of humanity. I love everybody. I love all of humanity. But that starts with a particular love, unapologetically, for people in my own community who I know are catching hell every single day. And I believe that what makes King such a great American is that he started out representing the concerns of a particular constituency. But all of America is made greater by his love, by his legacy, by his leadership, and by his service to the country. So I hope that my gut and that the spirit are in sync on those issues, but I'm constantly seeking that kind of guidance on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Hi, my name's Nate Barbie. Thank you for challenging me because I'm an Obama supporter and fan. And you're not only challenging him, you're challenging the community to stand up and hold him accountable also. But I also appreciate that you have a wide audience and a wide guest list of people that you've dealt with before. One of them is Wendy Williams. And you were on her show the other day, and there was a little back and forth about you being cheap. I don't find you cheap. I find you. I don't know you actually, but I would like to.
Frugal.
That's what I'm saying. I would like to know if you would share with us your view on being frugal as it pertains to the community and getting ahead in things.
It's a powerful, powerful question. I'm glad you asked it. I've said many times, Nationwide is the sponsor of this event tonight along with the Enterprise. I'm on a tour. I'm on 3 tours simultaneously. I'm touring with Nationwide, talking about financial literacy, because I went to jail as a college student. My mama didn't know about this till the book came out. Went to jail for writing bad checks in college because I didn't know how to manage money. It wasn't deliberate. I wasn't trying to beat anybody. I didn't know how to manage money. I learned the hard way, going to jail, about the importance of financial literacy. And so I'm on this tour at Nationwide for years now, talking free seminars about financial literacy.
Can I clarify one thing? You were in jail for like 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, that's all it took. I was scared straight. I've said many times, but I had a record, and that was terribly embarrassing as a college student. But I say all the time at these financial literacy seminars, the problem with our community, since you asked specifically about the black community, the problem with our community is that we spend money we don't have to buy stuff we don't need, trying to impress folk we don't even like. That's what our problem is. And so it's not about being cheap, it's about being frugal in my life. And managing my money, investing my money, saving my money, spending it wisely. Now, don't get me wrong, this ain't no cheap suit I got on here now. It's about $2,500 right here. And I've had these shoes for, about 10, 12 years. I've resold them, but they cost me $850 when I bought them. So I don't wear cheap stuff. I don't live in a cheap house. I believe in doing nice things to myself, but I do stuff that I can afford to do. And when I couldn't afford this, I wasn't wearing this. Some folks say you got to fake it till you make it. I just try to be who I am. But ultimately, it's about people living within their means. And inside of our community or any other, until we learn the lesson, which I thank my parents for teaching me, living within your means, you're never going to make it. Nationwide has a slogan that we all know that says, what is it? Life comes at you fast. If you're black, it comes at you faster. And so you got to be ready for that. But that means spending, investing, saving wisely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sir.
Hello, Tavis. My name is Troy Johnson. I'm from the African American Literature Book Club, AALBC.com. One of the things I noticed about you, and I appreciate the fact that you do tell tough truths or say things that are difficult to hear in many cases, but you're unique in another way in that the reaction to what you say is often much stronger than it is for other people who are saying the same thing. Cornel West or Michael Eric Dyson can say exactly what you're saying, but the reaction seems to be so much more visceral.
This is a bright man, y'all. This is a very bright man here.
So my question is to you, even me promoting this event, I got people who threaten to unsubscribe from my newsletter. Why is that? What is it about you think?
Yeah. I think the short answer is that we don't all wake up at the same time. We literally do not all, literally or figuratively, we don't all wake up at the same time. And truth telling, is hard for some people to process. I never went on the defensive after this campaign when everybody seemed to turn on me in our community. I never went on the defensive. I was hurt by it. It hurts when your community turns on you. But I know what my calling, what my vocation, as I said earlier, what my purpose is, and it is to bear witness to the truth. I also know that over time, people are going to understand a little bit better. We sing a song in my church, by and by. They're going to understand what we were trying to say and understand that it was always rooted in love for them. I think part of it, though, has to do with just a general mood. I'm not the only one subjected to this. Obama, Mrs. Clinton, a lot of folk get subjected to this. The hate in this country, the mean-spiritedness, is just so out of control. We're so run amok with that it's not just me. A lot of folk get subjected to that. The president, these last few days, defending his being born in this country, that's hate, man. That is hate. And so I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one subjected to that. You know, that happens to a lot of people, number one. Number two, I think some of it is directed at me because of my age. My friend Dr. Cornel West says, trust me, I do a radio show with him every week, heard in New York, called Smiley and West. If you think what I say about Obama is tough, you ain't heard Cornel West talk about Barack Obama. And West feels even more viscerally because he did 65 campaign dates for Barack Obama. And he feels now bamboozled, hoodwinked, run amok, and led astray. So you think I got some commentary? Hear what Dr. West says. But West doesn't get the push. He'll acknowledge it if he were here tonight. He doesn't get the pushback, one, because he's an elder. Two, because he is an iconic figure. Three, because he's the smartest Negro I have ever known. And most Negroes just don't want to argue with him because they don't want to get subjected. They don't want to get a verbal or mental beat down by Cornel West, the kind of which I couldn't give them. But the last thing is, and I've not said this in a public forum in this way, and I'm sure there'll be some pushback for even saying this. I mentioned earlier, and I mean this, my accountability issue with the president has always been about principle. I think I intimated earlier, and just give me another minute on this. I think I intimated earlier that when Bill Clinton was president, and black people loved Bill Clinton, I kicked his behind on the radio and TV when he sat on his hands and didn't go into Rwanda. When he sandbagged Lonnie Guinier, I went after him. When he signed that racist 100-to-1 crack to cocaine crime bill, I went after him. When he signed that welfare bill, I went after him on TV and radio. And I was in a black space then on Tom Joyner and BET. Not one Negro in the country ever said to me, "You're too hard on the president." But when this black man named Obama shows up, all of a sudden I'm too hard on him. They don't want to hear the accountability talk anymore. So I've never been personal about this. It's always been principle for me, and I want the president again to do well. But here's what I do find interesting that I've never confessed or said in public before. And since you asked, we'll go there tonight. It is the case, though, that the president, since being in the White House, has not invited me to one event in the White House. It is the case that although Sean Hannity has been there, Mr. Limbaugh has been there, Mr. O'Reilly has been there a few times, and disrespected the president in an interview face to face, and still got a couple interviews with him. I have not been invited to anything in the White House. He will not sit and have a conversation with me, although we ask every week. We talk to everybody in his cabinet. Now, the point I'm making here is I don't have a personal issue. I want to keep doing what I've always done. But there is something inside this White House that doesn't allow them to hear the same critique from a black man that they hear every week from Maureen Dowd, that they hear every week from Paul Krugman, that they heard every week from Frank Rich, that they hear from Thomas Friedman, that they hear from Nicholas Kristof. And that's just the New York Times. I haven't even gone broader than that.
If that's true, why?
That's a question that somebody ought to ask the White House. I don't know the answer to that. I'm making it clear. There's nothing that I have said about this president that any of my other progressive media cohorts have not also said, and there's nothing that I've said that comes anywhere near the mean-spirited evilness, evil hatred that gets spewed from the right in this country, and yet there's something about hearing that from inside your own community that makes the White House they can't stand that, and it makes it a tough road to hoe.
First, the Tavis Smiley lightning round.
The lightning round, yes.
Quick questions and quick answers,
yes,
okay?
Sir.
You got to stick to that.
Yes.
I know that's not easy for you.
I'll do it.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Do you own an iPad?
No.
Do you want an iPad?
No.
Do you own a smartphone of any kind?
No.
What are some of your most frequently visited websites other than your own?
Huffington Post, Diversity Inc., and those two. Those two.
What's the last great movie you saw?
Last great movie, The King's Speech. By the way, Harvey Weinstein on our show tonight.
Rerun, or are you going from here to there?
No, I just did it. I taped it yesterday.
Last great book you read?
Last great book I read. Somebody said fail up. No, I read so many great books.
Yeah, we have
I'm finishing the Malcolm X book. Yeah.
Name a young media person who is today, like you were 20 years ago, a young one with something important to say.
There's a young guy in Philadelphia named Jordan Harris, who I think you're gonna hear from in the future. Jordan
What does he do now?
Harris.
What does he do?
He came through our foundation, and he's now the youngest person in the city of Philadelphia, the youngest person ever in the history of Philadelphia to run the Youth Commission. But he's such a powerful media personality, I think, into the future. His name is Jordan Harris.
If you could do your show for a week from any country in the world, what would it be?
Cape Town, South Africa.
Who are you a fan of that might surprise people?
Other than Brian Lehrer.
Absolutely.
Okay, you promise you won't hold this against me? You promise I would never hear this tape on the radio?
I don't promise anything.
See, I can't say. I'm trying to be honest with you. All right, I admit, there was a period when I could not get enough of Flavor Flav. Now see, Paul, the white folk are like, Flavor Flav? What? I confess, I watched that nonsense. I couldn't get enough of it.
All right, the name.
Sit down, man.
He hates me. That's what I said about him. Who's that white woman he was sleeping with? What's her name?
Brigitte Nielsen.
Brigitte, that's what's his, Rambo's ex-wife.
Right.
Because I said that white woman went crazy. She went from Rambo to Sambo.
Sit down. That boy's crazy. Mr. Lehrer, yes.
Two more.
Yes.
Three more. How would you compare New York and LA?
New York, and how would I compare? If you can afford to have a place in both, you have to.
Ooh,
If you can afford, I wish I could afford to live in New York and LA. I would come back every 2 weeks.
Best thing about LA?
Best thing about LA, that I live in a city where there are real celebrities. So nobody in LA cares a doggone about me.
Best thing about New York?
Best thing about New York, it is, I said in an interview yesterday, and I mean this, I regard New York as the world's leading cultural destination. I love the culture in the city. I love it.
If they make a movie of your life, other than Paul Mooney, who would you like to play you?
Well, Denzel's too old.
Now we know what's going to be on page 6 tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't know. No, I think I said Denzel's a friend of mine. I think Denzel's he's just the greatest actor going. I love his act. He's a great actor. I don't know. I like this young brother Anthony Mackie, and I like what's the young brother's name who was in the movie the Spike movie, the Saint Anna movie, the young actor. Derek Luke. I like Derek Luke, yeah.
And last thing, we're celebrating your 20th year in broadcasting. Where would you like to be 20 years from now, do you think about it?
I can't, it's a great question to close on. I can't even see that far. The short answer is I literally do not even attempt to plan my life out more than a year at a time. Every year on my birthday in September, I spend a part of my day in solitude. And what I do with that solitude is to pull out, and I always have it with me, it's in the back room tonight where my briefcase is in my bag. Every year on my birthday, I write down the goals. And you know, a lot of people do New Year's resolutions at the start of the year. I never quite understood that. On my natal day, on the day that I've been blessed to live another year, this is my day, and this is the day that I've lived another year, and on this day, I want to assess my life. So every year on my birthday, I write down all the things that I want to accomplish in the next year. I don't get crazy, 4, 5, 6, 7 things, some personal, some professional, and I divide the list up. Every year, there's something in my own person, in my own spirit and soul that I want to get better at, that I want to work at as a person. So a few of the things on the list are personal, a few of the things on the list are professional. Big goals, big goals. I write this list down every year, and I keep that list in my briefcase everywhere I go, every year of the day, and I consult it often. And when I work something out, I check it off. If I'm making progress, I write in my personal journal every day as I do. On my birthday, I look at that list and I ask myself, like Ed Koch used to ask y'all, how am I doing? And so I ask myself every year, how am I doing on these issues? How did I do this year? And then I write down things I want to accomplish in the next year. And that's how my life works. It works in year cycles. I don't do deals more than a year. My radio deal is not more than a year. My TV deal is not more than a year. I never do deals more than a year, and all of my deals basically begin and end with my birthday. So on my birthday, I get a chance every year to just reassess my entire world and whether or not I want to renew, whether or not I want to extricate, whether I want to try something different. And I've just found that for me, I can only see a year into the future. I hope that 20 years from now, whatever I'm doing, I will be doing the best I can with whatever I have, wherever I am.
You've been watching a special edition of BrianLehrer.tv, a conversation with Tavis Smiley on the occasion of his 20th year in broadcasting. It was recorded at Cooper Union and edited to fit our broadcast. We're here every Wednesday night at 7:30 with a look at how new media meets New York, and tune into my daily radio program from 10 to noon each weekday on WNYC Radio, AM 820 and 93.9 FM. Thanks for watching.